Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Unleashing Potentials podcast. Joining me today is Menzel. Is that how I pronounce it?
Mizel, Vicki Mizel.
Vicki Mizel.
Think of a gazelle, my gazelle, Mizel.
Yeah, nice to have you on the podcast, Vicki. How are you?
Very good. It's nice to be here. I always get excited when I'm going to be on this podcast or speaking or acting. It gets me happy.
Yeah, I'm happy too. We were talking about the weather. What is the weather like where you are?
It's going to be 99 today.
Oh, okay. How hot is that? We use Celsius.
Oh, so it's 90, like almost 100 degrees.
Oh, okay.
Like hot, very hot.
Oh, wow.
Like Bikram hot yoga hot.
Yeah, that does sound really hot. Yeah. So can you tell us more about you and what you do?
Yes, I was born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I was a teacher for about 30 years, teaching speech and drama and English. And in my early 20s, I learned a memory system that I just fell in love with. So I was teaching it to the kids and teaching it on my own and giving speeches about it. And then I was working so hard with the kids that one of my supervising teachers said, you know, you're doing double duty. You're working with their emotional difficulties and academic. You should pick one. So I went to grad school to get my master's in psychology and became a school counselor as well as a MFT therapist. And then my heart just sank as I was seeing more and more people getting Alzheimer's and dementia. So while I was in grad school, I started writing a book about this memory system. And then I got hit by a big rig truck and lost my memory. I was very severely brain injured. It took about 6 to 8 years to get better. But the way I got better was by teaching the memory system to older adults and even to Alzheimer's patients. And so they got better and I got better. And then my first book came out. And I was just basically working with seniors. And then the regular person said, what about me, who's just trying to remember people's names and make a living and, you know, let people know I care about them and remembering things enough to trust them. So I also did corporate teaching of memory training and presentation skills and like that. So but my favorite things are really teaching memory training, speaking, and acting. And I like being a therapist too.
Oh, wow. That's really, really cool. Yeah, I think in my case, at least, I could always use some help with memory. I think lots of people do struggle with that. Some are willing to admit it, others not so much. What are your thoughts?
You know, you're so right. That's one of the biggest problems is people are afraid to admit that they have a problem. And then they try to compensate for it. And then they get worse. And then the struggle becomes bigger. And then there's confusion. And then there's depression. And the thing is to just, you know, if there's a problem, it gets bigger if you don't address it. And there are other memory methods, but I learned the other memory methods because I was curious what else was out there. But I kept coming back to the one that I had learned about 42 years ago because it was more powerful than any of the others and easy, like really, really easy. And if people could realize that an easy method that they could practice every day to strengthen their brain capacity, organize their thoughts, be able to help them concentrate and focus. And then as you practice it every day, you get more and more abilities. So you start to get more intuitive. You remember things and don't remember how you remember them. So you organize the information as it goes in so you can recall it more easily. And one of my most popular courses is how to remember names, because
Oh,
people
wow.
can remember picked faces, but not names. But
Mhm.
no, now that I've worked with kids, I've worked in business and corporation, I've worked with older adults. I
Mm.
really think the most important thing is prevention. So what you eat makes a difference, what you put in your body. One of the other things is we get exposed to things without knowing. We get exposed to mold, we get exposed to chemicals, paints and lacquers, have fumes that go through the nose, get into the body. Pesticides are rampant, it goes into our skin, and all those things get caught in the brain. And over time, without being able to detox or take certain nutrients, then people just aren't as sharp and they're just not as good. And sugar is a really big thing.
Mhm.
Um, you
Yeah.
don't want to have a lot of sugar in your diet because it does affect the brain and it keeps it from being its
Mhm.
best.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Um, I have mental health issues, and I remember before it all started, um, something was wrong with my memory. And then as I go through it, I was in the hospital. My memory was really impacted, and it still is up to this day. Um, I'm happy that you work with everyone. What has been your experience with those who struggle mentally when it comes to memory issues?
Well, it's really helpful. My brother is has a condition of bipolar disorder and a little schizoaffective disorder.
Hmm.
And because we're so close, he learned the memory system too. And he found that as he's gotten older, he's having the opposite experience. He said, I'm having memory remembering, memory recall disease instead of memory forgetting disease.
Hmm.
And one of the things that he does is he goes in his mind and goes back to our original home that we had in Tulsa and
Hmm.
goes through the bedrooms and what color were the bedspreads and the furniture. And I remember it just because I'm so practiced at this method. My recall and my access to memory is easy.
Hmm.
But he just finds that as he does it, it strengthens his memory. That's different than the actual memory system itself. But when
Hmm.
you're struggling with mental health issues, it's natural that the memory would be affected because sleep is being affected, diet's being affected, uh, changes in medication or trying out different medications absolutely affect the whole body. So if you have a technique that can anchor in the information that you need and then focus on what's really important, it can actually help lift everything, lift the person,
Hmm.
help with confidence, knowing that what you're struggling through can be a temporary thing. My
Hmm.
whole life changed when I learned
Yeah.
the memory system.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Tell me more. Prior to the accident that you had, and then when you were healing from it, and then after that, what was the system that you used, and um, what was the meaning for it at the time you needed it?
Well, I had always had a good memory for events, things I had done, people's names, but I did not have a good visual memory. I didn't like reading because I couldn't see images as I was reading. So I got by on Cliff Notes and really good review in school when they would review for a test. And I would watch movies and had good recall that way. So, but I never thought I had a memory issue, but I did have a problem with concentrating. I found out years later that I had I guess a form of ADD.
Mm.
And I just thought it was natural that I would clean the house by starting in one room, get an idea, go to another room, remember something else, go to another room, because by the end of the day, all the rooms got cleaned. I just didn't do it in order, because to me, I thought that was boring.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was in my 40s that a doctor said, You have ADD. And I was like, Really? So concentration was hard for me. What happened when I learned the memory system from a memory expert who I later found out, I'm not going to mention his name only because um, he later found out he was a con artist, and he asked me to invest money with him for some audio tapes, and he ended up misappropriating the funds. So I ended up stuck, but I was so impressed with the memory system that I ended up using that money and just bought the rights from him, revamped the program, and just went out on my own, which was pretty scary in my early 20s. And my mom had passed away and my dad had remarried. So I was pretty much all alone. So it was kind of a brave, scary thing. But what happened is more and more as I would teach it, I started having an increase in my ability to concentrate. My focus became better. I started to dream in color, which I had never done before. A lot of people do that, but I couldn't. I wanted to paint, but I couldn't really hold images in my mind. So I'd strategize. I'd say, well, if I could memorize like 200 people's names, I bet I could hold a sunset in my mind and be able to paint it. So after probably the first 18 years of teaching it in schools, teaching it in education, teaching it in healthcare, and teaching it in corporations, I was working too hard and I got sick with the Epstein-Barr virus. And I met with a woman I was in San Diego at the time. Her name was Elizabeth Fortune. And I went to her and she had this light machine. And I said, I need to change my life because just working and doing all this stuff and writing proposals and doing all the marketing and sales has really plummeted my immune system. And so she had me draw pictures of the end result of what I wanted to see happen for myself. So I wanted to move to New York because I wanted to act. So I drew a picture of an apartment in New York for $500 a month, which I didn't know wasn't possible. And then I had myself going to art openings. I had myself on stage. I had myself in dancing. And she said, now commit to that and visualize it and see it every day, like run it through your mind. So I used the memory system to link the information together and then run it through my mind. And literally, it was literally like magic that I went to a party in Los Angeles and a woman said, and I just announced, I said, I need to move to New York and I can afford $500. And she came over to me and she said, I just want to let you know, I just got notice from my renters and my apartment is $500 a month. And if you will pay for it sight unseen starting March, which it was March, or it was February. She said, if you'll take it sight unseen, I'll rent it to you. And I just thought that was, I couldn't pass it up. And so I sold some jewelry that I had. I paid her the rent. Then I went there and immediately got hired through the Learning Annex, which I was already teaching in San Diego, on how to recreate and redesign your life using visual pictures. And they said, can that work for business? And I said, yes. And then I figured out how to teach the class. So I was pretty bubbly and vibrant, and people thought I was really smart, and I was able to memorize lines. And so I was really having a pretty good life. And then my brother got sick with bipolar disorder, ended up hospitalized a lot. And so then I couldn't really have this really fun life I was having. So I ended up going back to teaching. What happened is then because I was really the only one in the family that understood what was going on with him, but I didn't really understand. I needed to learn more. So that's when I went to California, back to California, only to Los Angeles for grad school. And I was got a teaching job. So I was both teaching full time and in grad school full time, which I don't recommend to anybody. It's pretty intense. But I was, humming along, writing papers and getting my license, my credential, and I was teaching the memory system to the kids. So I would say that I was at the peak of my abilities. And then when I got hit by the big rig truck, I lost everything. I mean, I couldn't dream in color anymore. It was scary to drive. I was in chronic neck pain all the time. I was in head pain all the time. And I couldn't remember anything. I couldn't remember who were my students. I couldn't remember who had been a classmate. There was a woman, we went to a party of a different memory, her uncle, who was a doctor, and Gary Small, who had taught memory training. And Gary introduced me, and then she said, "Hi, Vicki." And I said, "Hi, do I know you?" And she said, "You just sat next to me every day, every time we were in class for a year." And I said, "Oh my gosh." I said, "I'm so sorry." I said, I just can't remember. I got hit in the head a couple of times from a big rig truck. I mean, fortunately I lived. I was in an armor tank car, and I lived. If I'd been in a Volkswagen, I don't think I would be here today. So it took, in the beginning, it was actually using the memory system the way I had been using it, memorizing like a list every day or a couple different things, a list of 12, 13 things at a time, was way too much for me. So I had to work with maybe three images at a time. I had to rest a lot. I started taking brain nutrients. That helped a lot. Over time, I learned that getting more oxygen to the brain was really helpful, hyperbaric oxygen. And then one of my doctors in New York said, if you go into a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, practice your memory system after you've had some of your supplements or an IV of nutrition. That's going to be the most powerful way for your body to utilize the nutrients and be able to hold the new neural branches working. So I was able to do that. It took a lot of time, but teaching the memory system for 2.5 years to older adults, and them being slow and me being slow, so much was creative and stimulating that literally within 2.5 years, I was able to go back to teach school full time and be able to finish my degree. So it's pretty amazing, really pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, as you were talking about dream in colors, I love that. That should be a piece of art or book name. It's so beautiful. I think all of us need to dream in color to add more flavor to life. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about the pain that you had to endure after your accident. It
Thank
is
you.
not, you're welcome. It is not fun living with any type of pain. I've been living with chronic pain as well and mental health issues. And I want to thank you for the work that you do when it comes to memory. My memory is still impacted. I'm still writing things down. I forget things. I have schizophrenia, PTSD, not bipolar, but schizophrenia and other stuff. But I could be talking to someone and I had a good question. It happened all the time on the podcast. And all of a sudden, my mind goes blank. I'm like, what happened? Where did the question go? Do you have that happening to you? Did that happen to you?
Yeah, that happened to me. It still happens from time to time. And in fact, I was on Saturday, I was watching a woman in her 70s who's been a presenter, a professional public speaker since her 20s. And the same thing happened to her. She just said, "Oh, where was my train of thought?" So it's really natural. it happens naturally. PTSD is not it's very difficult. I've had numerous car accidents. I still have PTSD now. And I've even had some EMDR treatments that helped it a little bit, but I think I need more.
Mhm.
So, but one of the things that I used to teach and then reminded myself of it and have started doing again
Mhm.
is when I'm driving the car and I think cars are just going to come out of nowhere and crash into me.
Mhm.
What I do is I visualize like white light around the car.
Mhm.
I imagine myself like in the ocean, the beach, with the sun on my face, and get my body really relaxed.
Mhm.
And then I drive and imagine myself already at the destination that I'm going to,
Mhm.
with a smile on my face, ease in my body, and trees swaying, and just ask, like God or a higher source to keep everybody in their own lane.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I have fears of driving. I don't drive because I've been into a car accident. That traumatized me, and then with mental health issues, that's also hard for me to drive. So when people ask me, "Why don't
Yeah.
you drive?" I'm like, should I give them the short answer or the long version of why I don't, right?
Just
And
say
yeah.
I was traumatized and I'm not prepared for the risk of re-traumatization.
Yes, yes, yes. And I get traumatized every time I leave my house because my anxiety, it's crippling. And unfortunately, not everyone understand how crippling it can be unless or until it happens to them. Uh,
Right.
yeah, being so young, I'm supposed to do what society says I should and have a certain standard. But when things like that happen, traumas and illnesses, it's out of our control what we do with it, but it's also in our control how we can overcome those challenges as well.
Trauma is huge. I've had, besides car accidents, I had sexual trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and I have yet to find a gentleman that actually has the level of patience and compassion to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And trauma has to be dealt with both neurologically and physiologically,
Yeah.
because it affects the nervous system, it
Mm-hmm.
affects the mind, and it affects the reptilian brain, which is what we're used to, and then the amygdala, which has to do with the anxiety and fear and panic.
Mm-hmm.
um, what helped me with the anxiety, I think, was EMDR. EMDR helped. Having a pet has
Yes.
helped tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, I left in July and I went to a very little remote town in Oregon,
Mm-hmm.
and there's not much traffic there at all, and there's ocean and beautiful sunsets. And so I took a walk every day, and a walk on the beach at least every other day.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that helped a lot. Being in nature helped a lot. What are some things you do to help yourself with the anxiety?
I paint. These are my paintings.
Yeah, your
um
paintings are spectacular. They're
Thank you
really,
so
really
much.
beautiful.
Thank you. It's my escape. That's the first few things I go to is canvas and paint. I like to be out in nature. I write, I sing for fun, um, and I just do things afraid. Just because
Yeah.
I'm afraid, I have to keep reminding my body that it's safe, that
Yes.
no, I'm not gonna get shot walking down the street because coming from Haiti, a third world country, anything can happen. I have to remind myself that I am safe, my body is safe, I am in a safe community, and just constant affirmations I find. And
Yeah, that's
what,
helpful.
yeah, I it also helps me when I talk to people like you. I have a
Uh,
podcast. I'm not making any money for it yet, but I get to have conversations like this. That helps me heal. It shows me, hey, you're not alone. There are other people struggling as well. So those are a few things I do.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
Mhm.
because you're so beautiful. People would meet you and they wouldn't know. And you're right. You know, people's expectation of young and beautiful is that you should be having a wonderful life.
Mhm.
People don't think about what it takes to organize a morning or organize a podcast or
Mhm.
you need to pull things together to
Mhm.
just cook a meal or to just put things on a plate together, you know,
Mhm.
because I noticed that in Oregon, my mind was freer. I was writing with greater ease. I
Mhm.
was thinking with greater ease. And then when I came to Denver, back to Denver, it was hot. Um, the walking is the air is not as fresh.
Mhm.
And that I had a little clutter in the apartment, and I noticed that it really affected my ability to organize as easily. So I was like,
Mhm.
I just gotta move the clutter and just not overdo. Just focus on one thing,
Mhm.
get that completed, and put the other things aside for a while until you can get to it. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
really important to keep the mind uncluttered
Mhm.
so that the creativity can come through and your own intuitive thoughts, your own intuitive knowing
Mhm.
as to what to do to help yourself.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Tell me more about your foundation. Love Remembers. I love that, by the way.
Oh, the memory program as a
Yeah.
foundation, or me as a foundation from how my mom fed my brother and I nutrition and
Mhm.
learning about nutrition and alternative health care, that kind of foundation.
You can share all of it if you'd like. I'd love to know more. I love
Well,
learning.
our mother was a very atypical thinker. She had gotten sick early in her 20s. It was really because her body was reacting and knew that she wanted to follow her dream,
Mhm.
which was to be a movie star. And she had just moved to Los Angeles with her family, really to follow her dream.
Mhm.
And my dad saw a picture of her, fell head over heels in love with her before he'd even met her, and traveled to Los Angeles from Tulsa.
Mhm.
And then got tired of traveling to see her and just said, you know, let's get married. And
Mhm.
then she moved to Tulsa and kind of gave up on her dream. And her body, you know, people didn't know about body mind reaction.
Mhm.
So her thyroid ended up growing a goiter.
Mhm.
And my dad's father, I didn't find this out until both my parents had passed away. But my dad's father thought she, you know, was making a mistake, that she really needed to go back to LA and give herself a chance.
Mhm.
And my mom was not raised to think of herself first. She was not raised with high self-esteem. She was raised
Mhm.
by immigrant parents. And she was more worried about how my dad would be emotionally than her own happiness. So she ended up with a thyroid operation and they cut too much of it. And she ended up sick with migraines
Mhm.
and health problems throughout her life. So she started reading Adele Davis, who
Mhm.
was one of the first nutritionists that wrote a book, which she probably actually, if you look up Adele Davis, go to the library, I bet they might still have a book. She probably knows what would help certain types of mental health
Mhm.
um, conditions.
Mhm.
Because my mom went around healing people with diabetes through diet and, you know,
Mhm.
low blood sugar with diet and things like that. So she
Mhm.
got my brother and I on like 26 vitamin supplements when I was 5 years old. And my brother and I were throwing pills in our mouth and catching them and seeing who could swallow the most at one time.
Mhm.
And she wouldn't had no sugar in the house. She baked everything. and she would use, and she just used to say, I want you to have a good foundation. I want you to have a healthy life. I want to teach you about fruits and vegetables and raw nuts and seeds and things to get you eating them now, so that you'll crave those things, not Oreo cookies and chocolate and ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
So my friends would come to my house and look at all the vitamins, and look at all the little contraptions and things like that. So, and we had a good, stable family. My mom was a householder. My dad worked. My brother and I went to school and did activities. So I would say we had a very, quote, normal upbringing, so that there were no addictions in the family, no drug use, nobody was fat. It was happy and healthy. I got into trouble years later because Tulsa is a friendly, naive, kind town. And everybody was pretty friendly and open. And the worst thing that would happen in that town when I grew up was your house would get toilet papered, or somebody would siphon gas out of your car, or kids would shoot at light fixtures at night. So I was not prepared for con artists. I was not prepared for liars. I was not prepared for people who wanted to take advantage. So I didn't learn that self-protection, and I was too trusting. So I wasn't prepared for that. So I think part of a good foundation is, to have good self-esteem, to have a healthy sense of self, and to be more protective, not so people-pleasing. But my parents didn't know, because they were raised by immigrants. They were Jewish. My parents' parents came from another country, and all their parents were killed in World War II. So, these are things that I've had to come to learn on my own, and still working on them too. But in terms of a foundation for the memory system, I think it's now been a part of my life since my 20s. And because of it, I have so much confidence now that I'm not going to get a disease. I mean, knock on wood, that I still keep at it and still keep practicing, and I'm always still taking brain nutrients and things for the immune system. And I still need to do a little more detoxing, but I'm always on the alert of new products, new programs, new things. So but people need really the foundation of their self. You can come from a good family. If you didn't come from a good family, it's harder. But what I started doing when I was 16 years old was I started meditating. I started doing the transcendental meditation. And from doing transcendental meditation, I was able to feel myself more. And I think I was more listening to my own intuition, and was able to be self-guided to do the things that I wanted to do, that I felt called to do. It's I've been very fortunate that most of the jobs that I had were either self-created, or that I really liked teaching. And so I got a teaching credential, and I loved being in the classroom. I loved being with kids. I loved the conversations that would happen. And the kids would always say, "You're not a normal teacher."
Yeah. Yeah.
You're weird, miss. You're weird.
Aren't we all? We all have unicorns somehow. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I can tell the way that you were raised shaped your passion today and who you are today, which is incredible. I'd like to hear more about your book. What is it called again?
Well, I have two books. I have this is the first one that I wrote called Love Remembers. And this is
Mm-hmm.
the book of how I developed a supersonic memory using the memory training system, got in
Mm-hmm.
the car accident, got better from teaching older adults and Alzheimer's, and we all got better together. And then the second half of the book is the whole memory program itself,
Mm-hmm.
the way I would teach it when I was doing seminars or still do seminars.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the second half is the program on how to create a new life through visual pictures called Passion Quest. So this is kind of the foundation of, you know, if you really want to have your mind stimulated, more neural branch growth, millions and millions of new brain cells every day, and to
Mm-hmm.
really give yourself the foundation of a good memory for life.
Mm-hmm.
That's the book to get. And then my new book that I'm real excited about is called The Sister's Love.
Mm-hmm.
And this has to do with my brother here was dying. He was
Oh, wow.
in hospice in New York, and we didn't know if he was going to make it or not. And the doctors told me not to come. They thought it was too dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up coming because I didn't want a world without my brother in it for me. I just thought it would be too lonely for me.
Yeah.
And I didn't want him to be going through what he was going through alone.
Mm-hmm.
And then he made it. And
Wow.
he made
That's
it,
so
and then
cool.
here he is, just relaxing, listening to music and relaxing at home. So the
Mm-hmm.
way he made it really was because of I mean, of course, it was the hospital care and keeping him on a respirator, but
Mm-hmm.
it was really the nutrition. I called a genius expert, a gentleman named Timothy Binder, who's a homeopath, an acupuncturist, a chiropractor, and a naturopath. Guy's the greatest healer, I think, you know, of this century. And I happened to meet him when I was in college in Boulder and just kept in touch with them for 50 years. And when I called him and said my brother's in trouble, he told me exactly what nutrients to get, what homeopathic treatments to get, what it would do for him, what the benefit was of each thing. He spent an hour with me on the phone, even after he retired. And I went and got everything, and I called the doctors and asked for their approval. And they only approved 4 out of the 12.
Mm-hmm.
So I literally put it in my bra and snuck it into the hospital room.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. I can only imagine what that was like, to have someone you love, to hear that they're not gonna make it, to watch them suffering. Um, Obviously the pandemic, it was terrifying. I've never experienced anything like that in my existence. I'm still young. Um, what was it like when your brother was, in hospice? How did you cope, and where was your support system? Where was it at? Did you have support?
Yeah, I had a friend named Rod who I had known for about 33 years who happened to be in New York at the time.
Hmm.
And he was a steady um, force, you know, just really grounding, steady. And I would call him every day, let him know what was going on, and he would just be a great sounding board for me.
Hmm.
And but it was really my brother's attitude was very positive,
Hmm.
and he really took everything moment to moment.
Hmm.
He would tell me every day what he needed. So I just showed up. I wasn't sure what to do. I just knew to show up. And then he told me what he needed. He said, I need nutrition to fight the virus. Um, then I found all the nutrition. And then I found some drinks that are called Kate Farm drinks that are the most I think it's really the best nutritional vitamin nutrient beverage you can get on the market today. ALS people live on it. So I knew to get him that. Then his psychosis, as he started getting better, his psychosis interfered. So I would listen to him and calm him down with that. Then they were mixing up his meals. So I would go buy him other meals and bring them into the hospital for him to have extra meals. Then he needed to get more protein. So then I would advocate to the nutritionist and to the vice president of nursing. My brother needs double portions of protein. So I was basically on alert 24/7 and an advocate 24/7. And I called every enlightened person that I knew. I had a spiritual teacher. I called Howard Wills. I called a woman named Dorothy Lee Donahue. I had really tremendous support from Facebook friends. And then being in New York, I had my own chiropractor and physical therapist there. And then I could meditate. But I think it was really, and God. I was using visualization techniques too. I was not seeing my brother in the ground. I was seeing my brother producing plays again, us being on talk shows talking about his survival. I had a really powerful kind of half dream, half awake of our mother with us when we were little, getting on a train. And I was asking her, is it his time? And she was saying, no, he still has more to do. So I was just trying to keep a day-to-day positive outlook. And my brother, gave a lot of signs when I gave him the nutrition, and the first time I gave him the drink, he went like this. He made a Popeye sign. And I was like, oh, that's great. And the community in Astoria, New York was exceptional. I went sometimes when I'd go and get a cheeseburger for him, there was a place called Petey's. And I said, my brother's in the hospital and I'm getting him the cheeseburger. And they said, this is on the house. Just tell your brother we hope he feels better soon. So there was so much love. There was so much goodness. There was so much kindness every day at 8 a.m, but more like 5 o'clock in the afternoon when there would be, I called the changing of the guards, when the essential workers would get off work and the new ones would come in. There was clanging and cheering and clapping, and I could just feel it through my whole body. So, and I was lucky that I came from Oregon because it was just a good time in my life. I was not being affected by pesticides that had happened to me in Los Angeles. New York at the time was not using a lot of chemicals. I was just lucky that, because I'm allergic to chemicals now, it makes my skin burn. And I noticed that when I was in Los Angeles during the pandemic, even going into Trader Joe's or the post office, they were using so many chemical cleaners every hour that I would go in. Literally my arms would just burn. And but in New York, for whatever reason, they weren't using a lot of harsh things. And I was able to be okay. So I think it was springtime. It was beginning of April. So the weather was good. My friend was there. That made the big difference. Dr. Binder was in good shape. He had clarity of mind. I knew what to do. And then my brother himself, he just had a good attitude. He'd be laying in bed and the doctors would come in and say to him, how are you doing? And he'd say, great. And a doctor said to me, he can't raise his head. He can't walk. And he says, he's doing great. He said, that might just be the thing that saves his life.
Wow. That's incredible. It shows that how powerful the mind is and our intentions. That's what I'm learning. And your brother must have been and still is so lucky to have you as a sister.
You know, he is, and he's appreciative, but I'm lucky to have him too.
Mm,
Because if it hadn't been for his feedback, I wouldn't have known what to do. I could have just shown up,
mhm,
and said, I'm glad I'm here for you, and we'll just see how it goes.
mhm,
But instead, he said that he felt lucky that I came in. I tend to really keep the people that I like in my life.
mhm.
And he said, I'm just so grateful that you stayed in touch with Dr. Binder, and you stayed
Yeah,
in touch with your friend
yeah.
Rod, and you stayed in touch with your Facebook friends. I've got some Facebook friends that I've known since my 20s, and
Mm,
friends with my first best friend from the time we were 3 years old. And
mhm.
I just said, well, I just feel if you like somebody, why don't you keep them around, you know?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I love that you talked about advocacy. It's something I think most people don't have. Could be in any situation, really. I know for me, when I was in the hospital, I mean, I had psychosis and diagnosed with schizophrenia and whatnot. I mean, I
That's
wasn't,
really hard. I
yeah,
mean, that's
yeah,
really, really hard.
yeah, I wasn't thinking clearly. So I've been by myself all my life, really, and up to now. I was at a point that I needed help or somebody to help to show those people who am I, right? To advocate. And unfortunately, so many people don't have that.
Yeah, I'm a different personality when I've got somebody to fight for.
Mm,
I notice that about myself, that I have a trained self, a learned self as a teacher, and that's mine. I own it.
mm,
And when it comes to my brother, I don't hesitate to pick up the phone to ask for what's needed. When it comes to
mm,
myself, if I need something and it's emotionally charged, it's
mm.
very hard for me to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Very, very difficult to pick up the phone. If someone tells me no about an idea that I have, oh my gosh, it's very difficult for me to say, I heard what you said, but I think you're missing something. May I please share what my intention is and what I think could happen, and can we dialogue about that before you completely make up your mind? Just to be able to say something like that, I
Mhm,
think I'd have to write it down and read it. It
mhm,
just doesn't come naturally for me.
mhm,
So it's almost like there's this, very shy little girl who's kind of scared to go up against somebody who could be mean and
mm.
not nice to me. And then there's um, this ferocious
Mhm,
go-getter, just go-getter. I just hired a screenwriter, and she said, who would play you? And I said, well, me, I would play me, you know.
Yeah.
And then she said, well, if there was like a really known actress. And I thought, well, when I think of that TV show Alaskan, something that
Mhm,
Hilary Duff is in, and
mhm.
she's just a go-getter the whole
Yeah.
time. She's takes no for doesn't take no for an answer. She just
Yeah.
goes and goes, and she's unafraid, and she just keeps going. I
Mhm,
thought, yeah, that would be the character.
mhm,
It would
mhm.
be her. It would be her.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the profound joy of failing or learning from our failures. I'm very similar to you. There used to be that little scared girl, especially with the culture I grew up in, to listen to adults, to do what I'm told, and I kind of carried that through my adulthood. But now I really don't care.
Well, that's
I
good.
don't care. I respect people. I love people. I don't typically look for approvals to do anything. Obviously, I don't hurt anyone's feelings or their dreams. But yeah, it's a muscle that takes exercise, I think.
Yeah, I think you know, I've had some things happen to me, and I didn't have a strong enough voice, you
Mm,
know, that and I thought, you know, something like certain people, I think they would never get raped. You know, they
mm,
would just have this energy around them that nobody would mess with them.
mm,
And the people who, you know, and I don't want to make a blanket statement because that's, you know, it's not about sex, it's about power and whatever else.
mhm,
But there are just some people you just don't mess with, and then there's other people. You know, they say they look at someone's body language whether they're going to be a target or not.
mm,
You know, and it's
mhm,
usually somebody who's a little meek that
mhm,
they go after.
mhm. Well, I can say not every meek person or child stay meek. I used to be one of those people, and I am not meek. I am 20 lions.
Oh, good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just over time, I think when we hurt so much, when we allow people to take so much from us without our consent or permission, there comes a time when we put up a very solid walls.
Yes.
Mhm.
I agree with you. I can see the power in your horse, you know, power in your
Yes,
horse there.
yes, yes. As I
The
was
movement.
thinking this, I saw myself running fearlessly through anything, through speed, through light. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, do
No,
you
that's
have
true.
oh, go
And
ahead.
I like what you said when people take without permission. You
Mhm,
know, I think people, I've even seen a nice someone who appears to be nice do something like that.
mhm,
That and then have a difficult time facing themselves that they did do that. That,
mhm,
you know, they get a thing in their head and they're miscalculating,
mhm,
you know,
mhm.
instead of really being right there honoring the other person. I think that's where you go back to trauma, that trauma is so misunderstood
Yes.
and so misperceived.
Mhm,
And people think if you're okay in one moment, they don't realize the triggers that
mm,
happen in
mhm,
the next moment, that it can take you right back to an event and you're not even present anymore.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I always talk about forgiveness. Just because we forgive doesn't mean we forget. Just because we forgive doesn't mean we give our power away. We're protecting our energy from people who may not understand what they're doing. Maybe they do, they choose not to do anything about it in terms of how they're impacting that other person.
Yeah, it's very hard. It's
Mhm,
very, very hard. There's I think more and more couples who become counselors together,
mhm,
the focus is on listening, you know.
mhm.
So you've got to listen to yourself, and
Yeah.
you've got to listen to the words, and you've got to listen to the context of what something is, and then the action or action that happened or that needs to happen.
Mhm. Yeah, you're right. So Vicky, do you have anything else that you would like to share with us?
I think the most important thing of all, and um, is that people really need to prevent things before they get worse. So if they're having even a tiny little problem with something, to address it no matter what it is.
Mm-hmm.
If it has to do with their memory, then they can go to my website, which is Brain Sprouts,
Mm-hmm.
plural, brainsproutsmemory.com. I have all kinds of free videos and speeches and talks. And then I also have the audio series of the whole program on MP3s in the store.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I really recommend getting it. I'm lucky that I started in my 20s and now I'm in my 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even want to imagine what could have happened to me without it. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
just don't want to imagine it. And the
Mm-hmm.
other thing is that dementia and Alzheimer's are things that can be improved. They can be improved with nutrition, with protein, with exercise, with detoxing problems.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important thing is that you can create, using visual pictures and see the end result of what you want. You can
Mm-hmm.
create a life anew in the way that you want to. And in the areas that you have blind spots or you just need help, there's so much help out now, so much help that you can get on insurance, on Medicare, but make sure it's a good fit for you so that you're comfortable.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there can be a lot of shame that is tied to us losing our memories. I know for me, I've experienced that type of shame that I'm so young, what's wrong with me, my mind? And I've had other people being frustrated because what they said to me, I can't remember it the exact same way. What would you say to people like me or anyone who is experiencing those type of memory issues or situations?
Well, if you have an illness, tell yourself there's no shame in it. We tend to be shamed if, a lot of people with sexual assault, there is a shame. There's a shaming in it because you think it shouldn't have happened. But you don't know when some part of them is going to come out, or somebody who it hasn't worked out their issues with their mother or their issues about their own body, and you can't control what someone else is going to do. But what I'd say is there's no shame in asking for help. There is no shame in asking for help. And you could just draw a little picture of yourself, in the feeling, and then draw a picture of yourself, how you want yourself to be. And then think of some little action steps to take that to be able to support you being able to get that. Not telling someone what to do, like don't feel ashamed, but if you do feel shame, I guess you could draw it, you could sing it, you could make a poem with it, you could acknowledge it, and then you could shift it to what would you prefer to feel? Well, I'd prefer to feel empowered. I'd prefer to feel freely self-expressed. It really is what people do with. I met a gentleman the other day at a luncheon who has Tourette's, and I didn't know he had it. It wasn't until he got comfortable and he was speaking that I was able to start to see it. But he went on and became a principal of a school and got his master's degree, and just ended up using every opportunity not to have to take tests, not to have to read, but to do the same information verbally. And now he retired after the pandemic, and now he's free, and he moved himself, and he writes lyrics and poetry, and just published a poetry book. And it was really a reminder to me of, here's somebody who has every excuse in the book and is kind of like a shining knight, going around to people, and seems genuinely happy, genuinely seems happy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have one more question for you before I let you go. What is the meaning of life for you?
I think for me, it has to do with loving my brother, loving my cat, loving myself, learning to love myself more, loving certain activities that I really, really enjoy, loving nature, loving people. I think love for me is the thing that holds the most near and dear to my heart. And loving my ancestors who loved me, really genuinely loved me. My mother, my grandmother, my uncle, my grandpa, my aunt, they just purely loved me, and I felt so alive and safe in that love.
That's so beautiful.
That's what keeps me going now.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. That touched my heart.
Thank
Oh, thank
you.
you.
Yeah, it
Thank
got to
you,
me
Vicki.
too.
Oh, thank you
Yes,
so
really good
much.
questions. Yes, really
Yeah,
good questions, Bernadette.
yeah.
Thank
I
you.
needed to hear that. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, what you do, what you stand for, and the power of your love. You have spread it everywhere that you've been, I can tell. And you have connected to my soul on a deep level. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is a great moment for me. I really appreciate the
Mhm,
me that comes out in moments
mhm,
like this.
mhm. Please come back anytime.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.